with newcomer Anna Gibson looking strong, only 2 minutes down on the race leaders. Anna Gibson was keeping her composure and was now up to third place. And on her debut, Anna Gibson holds on for third.
What do you love about running?
I love to challenge myself. I just like the feeling of pushing my body and my mind.
2023 second team All-American indoor mile, indoor distance medley relay. 2023 academic All-American first team, NCAA record holder in the distance medley relay. Most recently, now professional runner with Brooks, with a pro debut at the USA Track and Field Outdoor Championships, clocking a PR at the 1500 meter 409.58. And she just got back from Italy, 12th place overall Golden Trail World Series final. Anna Gibson, welcome to the Cool Impossible Running Show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so we were just talking. You're right in the middle of jet lag. Where'd you just come from?
Yeah, I just got back from Noli, Italy. Got home last night, but I traveled for over 24 hours to get back. So it was a lot.
And so we're going to dive into everything, but you just went pro. You had your pro debut at the USA Track and Field Outdoor Championships. So you've got track, and now you just got back from Italy, running mountains. What the heck is going on here?
Yeah, I've had a crazy couple of months. But yeah, I finished my college career in June and then raced at USA's in July, and then immediately just jumped right over to trail and started racing that. And I'm excited. I'm going to go back and forth between track and trail for the future. So
yeah, and then that's pretty incredible. I mean, there's really two different sports, but that really gives us a starting point of why you're able to do this, because you're from Jackson Hole. What was it like growing up in Jackson Hole and all the adventure-based activities that we have right outside our door? And how does that relate to running?
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Jackson was the best. I feel super spoiled and really fortunate to have grown up here and to still call it home. I do spend a lot of time in Jackson, even though I've bounced around a lot. But I think just the culture here definitely was the reason that I ended up loving to run in the first place. There's just so many incredible athletes here, people who are not professional, people who don't compete, but who just absolutely crush it on a daily basis. People like that all the way through professionals in a bunch of different sports. And so, yeah, I just grew up around that culture, and my training essentially just started as playing. It was just having fun and doing things in the mountains with my family and with my friends. And before I knew it, I really enjoyed competing as well. And yeah, I think that's a huge foundation of why I love to run.
So what were some of those activities you just do on a weekly basis growing up in Jackson?
Oh gosh, all kinds of stuff. I think the biggest one is probably skiing, just Nordic skiing, downhill skiing, touring. Now I've gotten into skimo a little bit, and then biking as well. I started road biking when I was pretty young, and then got into mountain biking a little bit later, and I do a lot of gravel biking now. But I mean, we did a lot of stuff as a family, like kayaking. We floated the river a fair amount. Those are the biggest ones for me. And
I think that's what's so cool about Jackson is everything's so accessible. So you can do all these other things and it doesn't have to take time away from your running. And do you remember that the earliest moment where you kind of were presented with the idea that, hey, maybe you could be good at running, or that you were good at running?
Ooh, I think the earliest awareness that running was something I really enjoyed doing and had some promise at was in middle school. When I was running cross country, and we had this thing in Wyoming called the Best of the Best. And it was not really a state meet. It was just this meet at the end of the year that a bunch of athletes went to. And I ran, I don't even remember what time I ran. I think I might've done 5:33 or something in the mile. And I was second place there by just a tiny bit. But me and the other girl who had won it, we ran in separate heats. And I was just so angry. I was like, man, I wish we could have just run together. We would have raced and it would have been awesome. And I think in that moment, I was like, wow, I'm really cut out to do this. Like, I'm super competitive and I like wanted to race this girl. And then from there, like, yeah, just all signs were pointing towards running being something that I really like to do.
Leading up to that moment in middle school, were you running like just on your own? And, at what point did it become like this thing you did on a daily basis, or kind of what we would consider training?
Training for me started in 6th grade. And I had been doing a bunch of different sports growing up, mainly downhill ski racing. And I loved that so much. And I got to middle school and my mom said, hey, you should try joining the cross country team because it's during the fall and you'll be in good shape. And I didn't really enjoy doing like the classic dryland training for skiing. And so I was like, oh, sure, I'll do that. And I like went to training and I had made a couple of really good friends there who are still some of my best friends to this day. And I was immediately sold. So that's how it started. 6th grade was the earliest.
And what was it like, being a cross country runner and being a track athlete in high school, but you have High School Butte and you have Snow King and you have the Tetons all at your disposal. How did you find that balance between, adventure running and being in the mountains and doing what you needed to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because growing up in Jackson, just the way that it's arranged, like with the schools just right at the base of some really amazing trail systems, like they were always one and the same for me. Like training on the trails and the track, like sometimes it would happen in the same day. Like we would go do our warm up and we'd run up a trail and then we go do a track workout. Like it was one and the same. And it's funny because now I get the question all the time, like, oh, how did you get into trail? And I'm like, I don't really think I got into it. Like I just started running, and trail and track were like the same thing. And now they're a little bit differentiated. Like I go through different training phases where I focus on one or the other, but they're still like very much the same, even though they're very different sports.
Did track help you more for mountain running, or did mountain running help you more for track?
Oh gosh, that's an amazing question. I think right now, my experience has shown me that track helps me a lot on trails. But I think that mainly I just see it that way because that's the order that my seasons go in. Like I get really track fit and then I take that fitness to the mountains and I translate it into trail fitness. But I'm sure that if it went the other way, it would I probably would see it opposite.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to dive into that later. So just hang on to that thought, but it was a good time to ask that. So, all right. So on from high school, now you're going to Brown, right? You did, how long were you in Brown?
I was at Brown for a year and a half.
And then you ended up at University of Washington, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Good. And so what was the biggest adjustment going to just college in general, university in general, from a small mountain town?
Oh my gosh, it was a huge adjustment. And I think out of high school, I was looking for that a little bit, which is why I went to Brown, which, Rhode Island is really different than Wyoming. And the East Coast is just different in general. And I actually got hurt 2 weeks into my freshman year. So I never put on a uniform and raced for Brown. So that transition was massive for me, not just because of school, but because I went from being one of the best high school runners in the country and getting recruited to a bunch of different universities to suddenly like being on a team, but not competing, showing up to training, but not running. And it was a really big learning curve for me. I had a lot to adjust to.
And talk more about that, again, coming from, even though you were from a small town, a small mountain town in a bubble, like you said, you were one of the best runners coming out of high school. What were some of those challenges just from an athletic standpoint?
I mean, it's an interesting question because I feel like I almost didn't even really experience it, like having never traveled to a meet with Brown. Like I never raced or anything. So I just felt like the second that I got hurt, everything was kind of just like different. Like I didn't even get to compare myself to everyone else or see how I stacked up against college competition. Like I sort of just got there, got hurt, and then was struggling like a lot, like mentally and physically.
Was that a blessing in the disguise in the long run?
Now I think there are a lot of good things that came out of that time. I grew up a lot and I had to learn how to take care of myself. And I learned that being happy is like the number one most important factor to running well. And I wasn't going to get out of my situation until I changed that. And I was in a place where I could be super stoked on life and having a great time. So yeah, I think that was like, there was a lot of learning that came out of it, but it was a really hard time in the moment.
And then on to the opposite end, the left side, right? The left coast. How is even though you were injured at Brown, I'm sure at some point you were doing some running. How is, or experienced the East Coast? How is the East Coast running culture different than the West Coast?
Ooh, I mean, the East Coast, I never did much trail out there, so I can't really speak to that. But I did go to a couple of the classic like cross country courses to cheer on my teammates. And I mean, the surfaces are just totally different, like what you're racing on, which is partly what's super fun about, especially cross country. Just traveling to all these different places across the US to see like different types of terrain and like what they're working with has been really interesting.
Was there a different vibe though? Like just maybe even like if you could attach a personality to the East Coast versus the West Coast as a generalization, what was different?
So I'm kind of having a hard time answering the question just because my experiences were so dramatically different. Like I felt like I was in a different world with running, and I can only speak to, you know, my experience on the teams that I was on. And I went from a really small D1 school at an Ivy League where academics were like super serious and very important. And running was sort of like a little bit of a, you know, side pursuit that people were on, to suddenly going to like one of the biggest like state universities, Pac-12 school, qualifies for NCAAs every year. And that was the expectation. Like, and school was then like everyone's choosing their own adventure. Some people are making it really hard. Some people are taking easy classes to maximize their running potential. And yeah, just like my experience was so dramatically different just between the two universities that I went to. And I'm glad I had both experiences because I got to see very different worlds of the student athlete, like NCAA experience.
And so, you know, in the opening, I mentioned that you were an academic All-American. Were you a better runner or a better student at University of Washington?
I would say during my time at UW, I excelled probably more in the classroom. I did my undergrad, I finished there, and then I also did grad school there, which was in the law school at UW, which was very challenging. So I worked really hard in school, and I do enjoy school a lot. And there are a lot of things about my college career that frustrate me, like hearing you say second team All-American. I'm like, I never qualified for the NCAA final at any of the NCAA track meets that I went to, which was indoor twice and outdoor twice. So that there's a little bit of unfinished business there for me. So I think like I would say I probably excelled more in the classroom. Yeah.
So with that unfinished business, how do you then translate that to carrying that over to now becoming a pro runner with Brooks?
Well, I mean, that was a huge part. I was like, geez, I like want to run so much faster on the track. Like I was working out at a really high level this spring, and I had just like hadn't PR'd in a long time. I had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life and like with my family, outside of like the whole massive life transition that I was about to go through finishing school. And I felt like there was just a lot of factors that were sort of holding me back. And I just knew through and through, I was like, I want to run. I need to keep racing. Like there's so much I still want to accomplish with this sport.
So then what do you think led to that PR at the national championships?
I mean, coming out of the tunnel at Hayward Field into a packed stadium at USA's, like for the first time wearing a professional kit, like, you know, that was like the moment where it's like my dream just came true and I got to like share that with everyone who was there. So I think just like the freedom that I felt and like the sense of accomplishment, just getting to the starting line in my Brooks kit was like, I mean, it was one of the coolest moments of my life. And I think that that's typically when I race my best, is when I just am like, I'm so unconcerned with the result that like just being there in the first place is already enough to make me feel accomplished and satisfied and proud. And I'm just excited. Like that's when the magic happens for me.
Right. And so You mentioned that this was a dream come true. When was that dream? When did that manifestation start? Like to become a pro runner?
Oh, I
It was
mean,
just a kind of a slow graduate, or would you remember that it's like, oh yeah, this is what I really want to do?
I don't think I had a particular
Yeah.
moment. I think since high school, probably the middle of high school, I had people always saying to me like, "Oh, we hope to see you in the Olympics one day," or like, I don't know, just kind of like making jokes like that, like along throughout my career. And that eventually like kind of gets to you, you're like, well, like maybe one day I could be a professional. Maybe this could be my job. Maybe I am good enough for that. And then you kind of just get addicted to like trying to find out if that's actually true. I think the dream for me, like that's when the seed was planted, but it took a lot of different forms throughout, the first couple years of college when I was at Brown, like I almost quit running. I like was so done and I was so frustrated. I thought, okay, maybe I'll just put this away. And then like I had moments during college where I was like, I want to be professional at track so badly. I need to get faster. And then I had moments where I wanted to be really professional in trail only. So it had a lot of different forms. And I'm like, yeah, I got to the end at a point where I just was so positive I wanted to do both. I want to do every type of running.
It's a great message. And a lot of times I think the age grouper out there watching this always looks at professional athletes that everything goes right, and that when something does go wrong, maybe their goals, it's not the right goal. Speak to how maybe all those down moments, the ups and downs that are necessary for you to be where you are. And not that you wanted to be injured or have gone through what you went through at Brown, but ultimately there's always going to be peaks and valleys and summits, and how that really creates that path.
Yeah, I mean, I think the downs are so important, even though they're horrible to go through. Like they just give you so much perspective. And I think the time that I spent struggling over the last, like, I don't know, 8 years of my life when I've been like pretty focused on running, they all have made me realize like I'm a better person when I'm running well and when I'm like pushing my body and I'm challenging myself. And like without sport as like a centerpiece of my life, I just feel like a lot of things just kind of go wrong, like outside of running as well. And it just made me so certain that like running was what I wanted to do, and like I do want this to be my job. I do want this to be a huge part of my life. And then you just like have to work hard to get yourself out of whatever like bad situation you're in to like see the other side. So it's almost like motivation too to like get through it.
Now you're a professional athlete. How did this all come about? And what does that really look like? How does someone sign that contract?
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy experience. And I mean, I wish there was like a crash course when you're an NCAA athlete and you want to go pro that's like, here's how to do all the things, take these steps and you'll be successful. But that is not how the world of going pro works. So it was overwhelming at a lot of times. And just felt very haphazard. Like I had had conversations with the sports marketing managers at several different brands during the time that I was in college, not about anything concrete, but just like little meet and greets. How's it going? Oh, like, what are your goals? That kind of thing. You'd see them at all the NCAA meets and know they were watching you there. And I had very different ideas even in January about what I wanted to do than I did by the time, June or July rolled around after I finished my NCAA career. And it was time to make a decision. And Brooks actually, it's funny because Brooks hosts this massive high school race called Brooks PR. And I had won Brooks PR unexpectedly my senior year of high school, and then had gone and done my entire college career. And then like Brooks entered the conversation with me going pro pretty late in the process. It was literally at the NCAA meet. At the end of my career, I'd literally raced my last race for University of Washington when I like reconnected with them. And so it's in some ways it's felt like Brooks has been there all along, because that race in high school was a huge deal to me, and made a really big impression on me as an athlete. But then like we didn't speak until like after my career at Washington was already finished. So yeah, just it just took a lot of turns by the time I like reconnected with Brooks at the end.
So this is a tangent, but what's new in college sports is NIL, name, image, and likeness. And that's, you kind of brought to the forefront a little bit with Deion Sanders at CU football program, and how college athletes are now can make money while they're going to college. How do you see that infiltrating the running scene within collegiate sports?
It went a little bit slowly at first. I think people were super confused, and I actually had an NIL deal in 2022. So during my senior year of college, with Dynafit, and so they were helping me with some of my trail journey. They were getting me to some events and, connecting me to their network and providing me with gear that I would race in. But there was a lot of gray area and like a lot of, rules and technicalities to work out, because you're not allowed to be getting money for good performances. You're only allowed to have like support for your expenses, essentially, or do photo shoots for a brand and get paid for that. Like there has to be an exchange that goes beyond simply just being yourself as an athlete. So it's different than a professional contract. And I learned that really quickly. Like I had my deal with Dynafit and I learned a ton and it was an amazing experience for me at that time, where I was developmentally. But then like the situation with Brooks was like totally different.
I think a lot of people would be interested to know how you work with the brand to develop what races you do. With your case, you're going to blend track, maybe road and trails. How concrete or how much of a plan is in place when you sign versus, hey, it's more loosey goosey and you kind of are able to do your own thing with the amount of money that you get?
I think that definitely just depends on everyone's different experience. Like Brooks the reason that I love Brooks from the outset of this whole process was because they were super excited about me chasing every type of goal I have, on any surface of running. And there was a lot of flexibility there, with me developing my own kind of race schedule. And of course they're weighing in and saying, hey, like there's other Brooks athletes going here, you should try this event, or encouraging me to go in certain directions. But they were not trying to encourage me to choose track or to choose trail. And it was like, that was given to me as like my responsibility. And like I have a lot of freedom there. So I think that's not how it works for most professional athletes, but that's how my relationship is.
What's that balance going to look like in 2024?
2024 is a unique year just because it's the Olympic year and there's Olympic trials in the US at the end of June. So that's going to be a big focus for me for the next season. I just finished trail for the year. So I'll take a little bit of a break and then get back into training, but it'll be focusing on track through June. And then past that point, I plan to do what I've done the past couple of years and just switch straight over into trail and start racing there. But I think that's part of my learning experience that I'm still going through, is like, how do I make these two, like you called them different sports, they kind of are, like, how do I make these two sports fit together in a way that like is sustainable from a mental and a physical standpoint? And I think it's going to look different year to year, what my calendar looks like.
I think even on your Instagram feed, you say you're a nomad, but currently you're in Jackson right now. Going into a track season, are you going to go back to Seattle, back to the Pacific Northwest? What's winter going to look like if you're needing to be flat and fast?
Good question that I'm still finding the answer to. I definitely will be spending some time in Jackson. It's just home, and it's like where I feel the most inspired, and I have great training every time I'm here, whether it's running or, biking or skiing or whatever else. So I have full faith I can get fit being here, but like you said, I do need some dry ground and I need to get fast running specifically. So I will definitely go to some training camps away from home. Probably Seattle and a combination of a few other places, but I'm still figuring out what the calendar looks like.
Right. And will those camps be Brooks based or kind of your own doing? What would that look like?
I think probably a combination. Yeah. I plan to collaborate with some other athletes. I think training for track on your own is not necessarily the most effective for me, especially like especially coming from like the trail scene for the past couple months, like it's a lot of training, like wherever you are, you run in the mountains by yourself a lot, you like meet random friends. To have like a group, I think for track is really effective.
I mean, I think track is just like the kind of sport where you're going to have really bad days along the way. And like, there's some days where you're going to be the superstar and you're going to be pulling everyone along through workout. And then there's other days where like you literally will not hit splits unless you have someone like pulling you. To be really effective, like overall with training, like you have to figure out how to make those bad days work and like still have a good time, which is also great when there's someone else there who's having like an awesome workout and you're struggling. Like it just like lifts your mood so much.
Every athlete responds differently to difficulty. What do you respond well to, and how do those friends that give you that help you?
I mean, I think to like get to this level of track, like you have to respond well to like struggling. But I think, yeah, just like being around friends who like understand that environment, and it's like, it's a give and take every day.
But earlier we kind of briefly touched on, hey, how does mountains help you for track, and how does track help you for mountains? How important do you feel your track background and having that leg speed helped you go into this summer at the Golden Trail Series?
I think it's super helpful. I mean, you just have like such a good foundation of like endurance and fitness, and the speed is honestly really important. Like people don't always realize, I think, looking at trail running, that you do have to run like low 5-minute pace sometimes. Like I raced at Mammoth Trail Fest. It's a 26K race that takes you 2.5 hours. But the last 5 miles of that race, like I ran every mile under 6-minute pace. So you're like cooking down some mountain, and like there's a lot of agility involved as well, and like durability that you don't get from track. But like if you don't train on the road running sub 6-minute pace, at any point, like you're going to get destroyed. Like your body just cannot handle like that level of just like that turnover that you need to do that. So yeah, I think it's super important. And I also think like a big thing I've seen transitioning from track into trail, like during that time of year in the spring and summer, like I do a lot of training during track for like lactic training. So I'll train for, the 800, like I'll basically do 800-meter workouts where I go super lactic and then I have to keep running. And your body is doing the same thing when you're running up a mountain. And so like the 1500 or the 800 and like running a VK, like a 30-45-minute uphill race, like it's actually a lot more similar than I think a lot of people recognize.
Right. Well, and I'm a big believer in developing speed first, even if you're a mountain athlete, because, if you try to do it the other way around, you just don't have that leg speed. So let's go back to track season, and how much trail running are you doing, if at all, during track season and track buildup?
Historically, zero.
Okay.
Just because, I was on a college team, so I was going to training and we would run on, soft surfaces, but they're gravel paths. They're like 6 feet wide and there's no rocks. So pretty much none. I think I'd like to change that a little bit moving forward, as I'm making my own training and, working with my coach and stuff. But yeah, none to this point.
So just the opposite question, how much track or road running are you doing during mountain running, trail running season?
I was doing this summer a decent amount. Like I would work out on the roads, doing like an actual, like a harder workout, like once a week ish, at least every 10 days. And I run on the roads a fair amount just during like recovery runs as well.
For most runners out there have a really good idea of, when we talk about track running, everybody kind of has a sense for what that is, but not everybody has a true sense of what true mountain running, true sky running, in all the races that you did. I'll go through them real quick. And this is part of the Golden Trail World Series. She raced the Broken Arrow in California. She did the VK first place, and then the 23K second place. Then she went on to Pikes Peak Ascent, third place, and then on to Mammoth back in California and at fourth place. And then, like I mentioned earlier, she just got back from Italy at the final World Championships. for that. So I think the longest race was a 26K.
Mhm. Yeah.
Paint the picture. What are these races like? Again, we know what track running's like. What is it like to run up a mountain and down a mountain and up to 10,000 feet, in Pikes Peak, 14,000 feet?
Yeah. I mean, trail is insane. Like it's so hard to quantify. And all the races I did were totally different. Like Broken Arrow was crazy because it was in June and it was like still snowy. They were literally out there. The race crew was like shoveling stairs the day before the event, and they put in fixed ropes so you could like climb this super steep snowbank. And then there was sections of mud and sections of trail, and you're running through bushes and then you're running down the snow. It was like just a wild experience. Then Pikes Peak, like completely different. Like Pikes Peak, you literally run uphill for 7,800 feet. I think it took me 2 hours and 44 minutes. And you're running, yeah, like you said, above 14,000. So that was just a wild experience, unlike anything that I really do in training. I've never raced anything like that in my life. That was like the longest race I've done in terms of time. And then 6 days later, I raced at Mammoth, which was up and down, under 4,000 feet of elevation gain and descent. But about the same amount of time. It was like 2.5 hours, I think. And the race I just went to in Italy was like the most insane race I've ever run, I think. It was just, there was something going on every section. It was like up, down, down, up, down, like super technical descents through the woods, really challenging climbs. Like you're scrambling in one section using your hands. You're running through these like narrow alleyways in this like little Italian village. Just like so stimulating mentally and physically, like a chance for a break. So like every race is just a different adventure.
Speak to the different mindset you need for a VK or an ascent like Pikes Peak, where the finish is at the top, versus having a long ascent but then having a long descent, like at Mammoth or maybe in Italy. Well, how does the mindset shift?
I think it shifts pretty dramatically for me, just because I have really different, strengths. Like I am really good at climbing. That's what I'm best at. And until Italy, I'd never raced a course with a technical descent before. And when we say technical in America, it means something completely different than technical over in Europe. So they were all saying it wasn't technical before the race. And then, it definitely was challenging running. But I think for me, when I'm doing an uphill race, it's all about like rhythm. Like I just have to find the pace that I can go where I'm just barely below the level of effort where I'm like gonna blow it by the end. And I just have to like settle into that and like steady my breathing and just be really calm. Whereas like when you're on this like up down course, there's a lot going on. Like you're constantly having to shift and you never really get a rhythm. And so if you're looking for that, you're gonna totally panic. So I think, just a very different like mental approach.
And what would be a good workout for practicing the races that don't have that rhythm? Obviously in an ascent, you do a threshold workout where it's steady. Hey, you're working on that, but just the opposite of like the Mammoths and the Italies of the world where you don't have that rhythm. What would be a good workout for that?
Well, I think it's something I want to integrate in the future. Yeah. A couple of friends and I were talking after the race about how we would like to do workouts where you run up, down, up as like one interval, where you have to like, you just destroy your legs on the downhill and then you have to turn around and go back up and like change gears like that, which is not something I've done in a workout before. I've done it just on a training day. But I'd like to do it as a workout. I
think you mentioned Mammoth, or was it Pikes Peak that was your longest race, at the first longest race? Was it Pikes Peak? So what was that? What was the overall time? I
think it was 2:44.
So I would imagine you're used to running up mountains, but maybe what was new for you in a race scenario is dealing with the fueling. What was that something that you kind of are still trying to figure out? We're probably always trying to figure that out. Every time, every race is a little different sometimes, but how was that a challenge for you? And how do you see yourself going forward with kind of practicing more fueling?
Yeah. I mean, that was a huge factor for me at Pikes Peak. Like I had never used a gel before, which is insane. I can't believe I'm saying that. It kind of embarrasses me a little bit, but I'd never used a gel and I didn't really want to have Pikes Peak be my first experience with it. So I went into that race with a very unique fueling plan, which was to eat how I would eat on like a mountain adventure, like, yes, I have a track background that doesn't require much fueling while you're training, but I do have a lot of experience doing long efforts, like, in the Tetons, like running up the Grand or doing the Middle and the South in the same day. Like I've run the Teton Crest Trail, which we did it in just under 9 hours. So I had to fuel for that. And I spend long days on the bike, like I'll ride 100 miles, so I'm out on the bike for hours. So I had some techniques, like I knew applesauce pouches. That's something I run well on. So I just literally ate actual food. Like I had applesauce and I had peanut butter, weirdly enough, on Pikes Peak, and it did the trick, but I definitely want to get better. I think there's a lot of room for improvement as far as like my nutrition strategies go. And every race I've done a different thing.
Do you think you'll try to stick to experimenting with real food, or will you think you make that transformation over to kind of the manufactured gel to make things a little easier?
I think probably trending towards gels, just because it's definitely what works for a lot of people, and it's easily digestible. It's super small, like it's way less weight and way less like of a big thing that you have to carry with you. But I also think there's like an instance for, like the applesauce. I know it works. It goes down really easily and it's not quite as much carbs as you should be having, but it is better than nothing. So like in Italy, I did 2 gels in the race and an applesauce, because at the end of the race, I was like, I just don't want another gel. Like I just want something that I'm like so used to. So I think probably a blend of the two.
Do you think that changes also with the altitude? Like again, using the Pikes Peak ascent where you're going up in altitude where it's really hard to even drink at that altitude versus more of an up and down non-rhythm type of race?
I mean, I think, yeah, like the demands that you're putting on your body are different every race that you run. And I think that's where my strategy that I went into Pikes Peak with, to eat food how I would eat on a mountain adventure, like that's where that strategy just makes no sense. Like, okay, I'm out on some easy adventure and I'm eating real food. Like, okay, that's great. But like the demands are very different when you're running, maxing out. Your heart rate is like 175 average for almost 3 hours. Like, that's not the same thing. Your body is burning different stuff and you need different fueling. So I'm still figuring out like what does my body need? And like in these different races, like I actually didn't really eat that much during Pikes Peak. Like I had way more fuel when I was in Italy just now, because my body was like, I felt like I was going through so much more of a hardship and doing something so demanding with like the changing terrain. But yeah, I think it's just an experiment. It's just have to figure out what works best.
So, and again, I think this is where your uniqueness comes through, track athlete, but you mentioned 100-mile bike rides, climbing the Grand, doing the Middle and the South, the Crest Trail, all these mountain all-day adventures. How much do you think that part of your uniqueness creates more of a fat metabolism that actually helped you require less in some of these races that were some of your longest races, but it was, again, nothing really new to you, and you didn't maybe need as much nutrition as maybe someone else might?
I mean, I think they help massively. Like just having done adventures that are like many hours longer than what you're racing, I think is really important. Like I would be probably pretty screwed if I was just a 1500 meter runner and I just decided that I was going to race some 26Ks because it sounded fun. Like I probably could do it, but I think it would be really, really hard. But like, having these long days where like a 6-hour workout is not that out of the ordinary or not that crazy. I think that like, that's where I was able to like make that jump pretty smoothly this summer.
And as a 1500 meter runner, what do you think is the optimal max length of long run? Just in general, take away your mountain fun. What would be a typical long distance run that would be appropriate for 1500 meters?
That definitely, I think, depends on the athlete. For me personally, like in the depths of track season when I'm like feeling my best, like my long run's 12 miles, which is nothing. And that's way smaller than what most of my track friends are doing around me. But I'm a really low mileage person during track season. Like I do high volume of training with a lot of cross training, but I don't really run that much. So 12 miles is where I max out.
And how did you discover that you were a low mileage, low volume athlete?
Low mileage, I think that honestly, it came about through just like trial and error. Like I had just been doing a lot of other activities and running 4 days a week where I would do like 2 or 3 workouts and a long run. And then I would add in like 2-3 hour bike rides or, would ski in the winter. And I ended up having some super successful seasons. And it was like, okay, I guess this works. Like I feel good and I'm performing well, and like running more doesn't seem to make me better. So we just kind of rolled with it. And that was just how we did things in college.
How is racing different in Europe than in the US? And maybe using your recent Italy experience with your summer of trail racing in California and Colorado.
Biggest difference I would say amongst the events that I did was just the rugged nature of the trails. Like in Europe, things are just like a bit rougher, a lot less manicured. There's like trees maybe growing into the trail a little bit, or like they just don't move as many rocks, or there's like serious erosion on the trail and they're like, it's fine, we'll just leave it. Whereas in the US, it's like pretty manicured, especially at, Pikes Peak, extremely heavily trafficked trail. It's pretty well manicured and super runnable the entire way. Mammoth, it's like in the ski area, so that's pretty well manicured. Like the lower section was a mountain bike trail, super smooth. So I think just, how we maintain trails in the US is pretty different. But again, that's also just a select few races that I did compared to one Italian, event. So,
but I would say Jackson Hole might be a little bit more similar to Europe with everything you just described.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no shortage of technical things for me to run here, like, which is kind of funny. People were like asking me when I was over there, "Oh, you've probably never seen anything like this, have you?" And I'm like, "Oh no, we have crazy mountains here. Like the mountains are big, the trails are hard. Like if you want to run down, there's endless places to run talus and chunky shale fields and all sorts of hard stuff." So,
what's your pre-run ritual? And it could be different. Maybe it's the same for any type of racing, but if not, maybe the difference between trail and track.
I think something that makes me really unique is that I don't really have a very structured pre-run thing. Like I have certain habits that I'm into with training, but when it comes to racing, like my warm-up is always generally sort of the same, but it'll have different activations and different drills for different days when I feel different ways, and nothing in terms of like nutrition or any weird superstitions or anything like that I do every single time. Like I show up to events and I'm just like try to be as relaxed and loose and happy and having a good time as possible. And that's when I do my best. So I try not to be like too aggro about needing a certain thing or needing to do a certain routine to perform well.
All right. So tough question. Many elite athletes need to be held back from doing too much. Where do you need to be held back? And maybe where do you need a little push?
Oh, I love that question. Talk about self-awareness. Geez. I need to be held back, I think, a little bit with my long days. Like long days are great, but sometimes, I have this very adventurous attitude. We're just talking about how I'm not always like super, like, I don't like to be too dialed. Like I like to just have a lot of flexibility and be loose. And sometimes that turns into me wanting to do bigger adventures than makes sense. And I haven't really had it come back to bite me yet, but I think especially as I've, that structure used to be made for me as a college athlete. Like I was reporting back to a college coach. I had to show up to training after a big adventure and like not get dropped by my teammates, and I had to work hard. And so I couldn't really oversend on the long days that I was by myself, because the next day I'd have to go perform well at training and be a good teammate. And now as a professional, like there's no one who's like relying on me to be my best tomorrow, like I could send it today and no one would really know. And I think that's an area where I'm like, I need to pick and choose my times to be like free and be crazy and chase adventure, and then like have my other times where I kind of hold myself back and make sure that I am dialed enough that I'm getting the things done I need to get done.
Right. And I think that just piggybacks right into something that what are going to be the keys for your professional success that might be different from the keys that were successful for you in college?
I think this is sort of, I think it's a double-edged sword, what I was just talking about. Like at the same time, I also want my professional career to center around adventure. Like I don't want to be the type of runner who just competes. Like I want to go on cool expeditions, whether it's on feet running or skiing or biking, like I want to travel and I want to see cool places and do other things too. So I think like that's something that I want more of in my professional career, that, because of the limitations of an NCAA schedule and, like trying to do a master's at the same time, like I wasn't able to have as much of that in college.
Got it. All right. So I have two more questions for you and then we're going to have some fun. So if there's one thing that you could change about high school and or collegiate running, what would that be?
About the system?
I have the word program. So you answer it however you want.
Okay. I think one thing I would change about college running, I think there are a lot of people who get out the other side of college and look back and say, wow, that was really, really intense. And I don't necessarily think that that's like the healthiest way to come out of it. Like I had a good experience, but I would look back and say it was intense. And I know a lot of people who had a bad experience and look back and say that was intense. And I think like developmentally where you are when you're 18 to 22 or 23, like maybe sport being intense as your first reaction is not like necessarily the healthiest. Like I wish it was just more centered around having fun and like setting a groundwork for being like a lifelong athlete, and not always so centered on performance and like competition. And I wish there was a little bit more like adventure allowed in college with sports.
And this is the balance I struggle with, because if you use that word intense for college, my experience was my high school was intense. And when I got to college, we weren't as good from a performance standpoint that we were in high school. So it wasn't as intense for me. And I struggle with, is intensity necessary for doing well? And what's the chicken or the egg? What does this all really mean? Is it important that we do well? And I look back and say, well, I wish maybe high school wasn't so intense, but would then I be the same person I am now? Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting point. And some intensity is necessary, right? Like,
when I say intensity, I don't mean going out and running. I mean just the intensity of the program. Yeah.
Yeah, like just the pressure and the expectation, like that level, that's what I mean by intensity as well.
Exactly.
And I don't think I had much of that in high school. Like that was very self-driven for me because I was not coming out of a school that is known for producing amazing runners, nor was I coming out of a state that's known for producing amazing runners. Like, I was kind of going above and beyond, and I felt very supported, and, the world was my oyster at that time. There was not a lot of expectation, but then that was a little bit different in college, especially after I'd kind of, established myself as like a solid NCAA competitor. Like there was just a lot of expectation to just like be the best and do everything right. And that level of intensity, I did not really enjoy. Like I think it's been pretty apparent to a lot of people watching my transition that I'm all about fun. Like I just want to be having fun when I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's how I do my best. So intensity, while it might be for some people, is not like the recipe for my success, I don't think.
Got it. Well said. All right. Last one. What's your biggest fear when it comes to running and racing? And I think I know the answer to this in a roundabout way, but yeah, what fears do you have running and racing? I'm going to spoil it. I see fear as a good thing. Fear is necessary to kind of create that path. So don't see fear as a bad thing.
I mean, I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing either, as long as it's coupled with like having fun still. As long as it's not preventing you from enjoying yourself. I think I don't know. I don't think I've had a lot of fear recently. Like, I think I've just been like really excited to find out what I can do. And I guess like just overall, like I would be afraid that I stop believing in myself the way that I do now. Like, you know, if I ever reach a point in my career where I don't think I can get where I want to go, I think that would be like so terrifying and that would be a scary realization. But I don't feel like right now there's much that I'm afraid of. Like, yeah, I'm like low key always afraid of getting hurt. Like, I don't want to hurt myself. That's really important to me. Like, physical health is like the number one most important thing in my life, I feel like. But yeah, it doesn't bother me on a daily basis necessarily.
What I like to finish with is in the book Born to Run 2, we kind of identified 7 ingredients that we think is important to run success, or what we call running free. Okay. And I want to go through those quickly and just get your own perspective on them. So the first one is food. What's your favorite pre-post race food, or even big adventure food?
Big adventure food, I already mentioned it, but like applesauce pouches, I think that's like been the secret sauce for me, and I've started a lot of friends on using them, and I just think it works great.
And so what would you eat anything before a Pikes Peak ascent or any of these races throughout the summer?
I mean, I would eat just like a normal like breakfast meal, but I don't do any fueling like immediately before.
Right.
Unless
so
I'm feeling.
People love to know what that pre-race is. That,
yeah,
you know, a pack of oatmeal in the hotel. What is that pre-race?
Again, like I try to be pretty flexible, but yeah, it's sometimes oatmeal. My favorite, if I'm able to do it, is like toast with eggs and avocado. Like, nice. I have like a solid breakfast 3 hours before I race.
Number 2 is fitness. One thing that you hate doing that helps you run in the most.
And
we know you like to keep it fun, but
foot PT. But I'm saying that right now because I just had a PT appointment, and I'm like, I just am not good at fitting that in, even though I know I need to do it. It's just hard for me.
Well, and everybody know out there how important I feel the feet are. So how's the ankle, by the way?
Well, that's largely why I'm doing the foot PT, is because I've been having some issues, and I really badly sprained my ankle about a month ago. So trying to fix that problem.
Got it. All right. Next one, form. What is the one thing you do that helps your form and mechanics the most?
Lifting in the weight room.
Nice.
Being strong.
Yeah. Good. All right. Next one, focus. What do you think helps your speed the most?
My speed. Ooh.
Could be a certain workout. Yeah. What's your go-to most important thing for speed?
In college, we would do like kind of a hefty workout where you'd like do maybe K repeats or something like under threshold pace, work pretty hard, get pretty tired. And then at the end of the workout, we would do 300-meter repeats, and the 100-meter jog back to where you started to complete the 400. You had to do in under 30 seconds, which is 8-minute pace, but doesn't sound hard. But in the moment when you're running, like you'd run 1500 pace for the 300 and then 8-minute pace for 30 seconds back to the start. It is so hard when you do that back to back to back. And so we'd do 8 300s like that on tired legs. And that just, I don't know, that workout hits different. Like I would just be done for the rest of the day, not able to function, but I think it like skyrockets speed and fitness. Nice.
Love it. All right. Next one, footwear. What's your favorite road shoe, favorite trail shoe?
Ooh, I'm still sort of experimenting with all of the wonderful things that Brooks has to offer. And I'm not saying that just because I'm like supposed to, because I run for Brooks, but I just like, there's a lot of options, especially in the road world. So I'm still experimenting with that. I think my favorite trail shoe that I've been racing in this summer is the the Catamount. And yeah, there's a new shoe coming out next summer called the Catamount Agile, which is really cool. It's like a VK specific shoe with like nice sticky lugs and like a little bit of a heel cuff so you don't get sand in it. And
have you run in it yet?
I have not run in it, but a bunch of my teammates are running in them right now and loving them. And I think it's going to be the shoe for me. I'm super excited. But for now,
I love the sound of that one. I'm minimal, and anything sticky and minimal is good for me in the mountains. So good.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, good. All right. 2 more. Next one is fun. How do you make hard workouts fun?
Do them in cool places with friends. And I know that's one of the other ones, yep. Fun and friends. But yeah, I think cool places, having fun places to train that you just are outside, like enjoying yourself. That's pretty key.
Yeah. And we're going to merge right into family and friends. So how do they play a pivotal role in your success?
I mean, so much. Like if you did sports by yourself all the time, I think it would probably not be that awesome. And just having good company is great. And yeah, I'm living with my family right now too, which has been pretty fun, just spending a lot of time with my parents. So yeah, I think those are both really, really important to me.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been a blast. I really appreciate you coming on, jet lagged and all, and can't wait you got a lot of fun stuff coming on, and I'm just a big fan and can't wait to follow along. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thanks for letting me tell some of my story and asking me good questions.
Yeah, you bet. Awesome. All right. See you next time.